Hello and welcome back to another video in the Complete Web Dev series, where it is my goal to take you from a beginner to a job-ready developer. In this chapter, we are building a content management system using object-oriented programming. In this specific video or lesson, we were going to try to finish up our model object, and then that way we can go through our application and easily manipulate data, and you'll just have to see how it works, but it is pretty magical. So if you're enjoying this so far, please comment, like, subscribe. I'm gonna have to reiterate again, please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future videos. I know that at least 90% of you guys are not subscribed who are watching, and that's a pretty high number to me. So, and if you'd like any merch, please head over to freeskills.life. That's freeskills.life, L-I-F-E. All right, so let's go ahead and jump over to the screen. Make sure you have your example up and running, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new branch. So let me see what branches I've already created so I know what video we're on. So we're going to be on video 17, and so what I'm going to do is do a git checkout-b to create a new branch, and we'll call this v17. I'll hit enter. The next thing I'm going to do is create this branch on my remote repository on GitHub by typing git push set upstream, and this will be origin. Origin tells it to do it on the remote branch, and we're going to call it the same thing, so we'll just call it v17. Oh, I needed 2 dashes here. We'll hit enter, and yes, I did mean that, git. Thank you very much. Now that we've done that, we are ready to go. So let's jump back into our code, and we are going to be mostly working in this model class that we started in the last video. So make sure that you have all of that. By the way, this series isn't really made in a way that you can skip or take videos out of order. So make sure you're going through them in order. All right, so let's scroll down below all of our find methods here, and we left off on the find total. And what we want to be able to do is I want to create a method that we can use directly on our model objects that is called save. Now this save is going to be a smart method, and it's going to have a lot of other things that it does. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to by default set a variable called save, and we're going to set that equal to false. If it successfully saves, we will change that to true. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to call a method called before save directly before this. Now this before save doesn't exist yet, and this is going to be basically a lifecycle hook or something like that that we can define in our models, that if we need to do any sort of preparation or anything else, we can do it before it actually saves. We have a before save hook here. So in order to fix this in the parent class, all we're going to do is go down to the bottom of this, and before our closing curly brace here, let's just create, let's see, should we make this protected? We'll just make it public. So we'll make public function, and we'll call this before save. And just we're just going to leave this empty on this parent class here. That way they don't have to add this. So we won't make this like an abstract or anything like that. They don't have to add this. But if they do run this, if they create it on their models, it'll overwrite this. So this one's not going to do anything because it has no contents in the body. So, but it won't break. So we'll go back to the save. So it's going to call this before save. We'll be able to do that if we need to, and we will be doing that on our models. The other thing that we want to do is, let me get back to here. We want to check something called validation. And so we're going to do an if statement here, and we're going to say if this underscore validation passed, and then and only then do we want to manipulate the database. Now by default this is just going to be set to true, so this is just going to happen, but it gives us the ability to run. We're going to create some validation classes, and it's going to give us the ability to run those, and you'll see a little bit more about how that works later in this video, and then also when we build the validators out. All right, so we got the validation passed. Now we need the DB, so let's do DB equals and we'll do a static get DB here. The next thing that we want to do is we need to get the values. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new method that's called this get values for save. Okay, we haven't created that yet, so we're gonna have little red squigglies here. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna do another if statement in here, and we're gonna say if this, we're gonna create another method called is new, which we haven't created that yet, so that's gonna be squigglies. So if this is new, then we want to do save is equal to db insert. So if it's a new thing, we want to insert it, and then we'll just do a static. We'll pass in our static, and you know what? We have the insert here, so we could just call. We don't have to call this on a DB, but anyways, we could call the static table here, and we will pass in our values there. Now, if it is new, what we're going to do here is we're going to say if save. So if this is successful, this is going to be an insert. So what we want to do is say this ID is equal to, and then we'll do our db get last insert ID like that. And now our ID will be populated from the newly inserted value. The other thing is we're going to go outside this if statement. So else, if it's not new, then we're going to be doing an update. So we'll set save equal to db update. And now this will pass in the static table, and then we'll pass our values into that. And then the third is going to be our condition. So we're just going to add a condition here for the ID, and we're going to set that equal to this ID. Okay. And then after all of this, what we're going to do is go outside of all of these if statements here, and we're just going to return save. So this will return a Boolean, and that will be either true or false. So that's all our save method is going to do, but we need to create this get values for save thing, and we need to know if it's a new. So let's start with is new, because that's super simple. So go ahead and create a public function here called is new, and all this is going to do is return empty, which is a built-in PHP function, this ID. Now the thing is this empty, if there's an ID, if this ID is null, then we can assume that this is empty, so it is new. If there is a value here, so say ID was 12, then this would return false, so then it's not new. And this is the what we're going to do to determine whether or not we're inserting into the database or we're updating the database. Okay, so that is new function. Now the other part of this is to go ahead and get our values for save, but we're going to have to create a couple methods in order to do that. So I'm going to go down here to the bottom, probably right here above this before save, and we're going to create a public static function here called get columns. And what we're going to do with this get columns is we are going to set it up as a singleton pattern here on our object, and it should only run the first time, but we're actually doing a database call to get all the columns that are in this table for the model. Okay, so what we can do here is we're going to say if, and again this is that same singleton pattern that we learned before, but we have this columns static variable set up. So if not, we're going to set that up, and at the end of this we're just going to return static columns. Okay, just like that. So we're only gonna, so if this has already been run once before, we don't need to run it again, and we can just return those. So we want to go ahead and set that up. So in order to do that, let's just do db, and let's do our static get db method here, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to set up our table, and that's also our static table. And then what we're going to do is build out an SQL statement here, and this is going to be show columns from, and then we're going to insert our table here. So it's a super simple SQL statement, but this will actually grab the columns from the table. And then what we're going to do is set results equal to DB, and then we need to use our query method because we're going to return results, and we'll pass in SQL there. And then what we're going to do is chain on the results method, and we can do that because this query method returns the database object. It returns this. So if we look at that DB and we go to query, let's see here, where'd you go, query? Right here, it returns this. So it returns the database object, so we can go ahead then and chain on this results method. So once we have those results, what we want to do here is let's set up an array called columns, and then we're going to do a for each, and we're going to say for each results as column. Then what we're going to do here is set a new element into that columns array, and that's going to be equal to column. Now the way that this is returned from the database is uppercase. We're going to do uppercase field like that. So this is going to take the field name. There's other information that is returned from this show columns from table, but we're just interested in the field name. So we're just do column field. Once we get through that for each loop and it's looped through all those, then we need to set the static columns equal to our columns array. And that's all we need to do. So now this get columns will understand its own columns based upon its database table by doing a database call, but we don't want to do that every single time we need to use this. We just want to do it the first time. And so that's why we set it up as a singleton pattern in this static property here. Now, in our save method, we got the values by using this get values for save. So we need to go ahead and set that up. So above that static method that we just created, let's go ahead and create the get values for save. And here, the columns are going to be equal to static. Well, you know what? Actually, it needs, yes, we could do static, and then we're going to do get columns, and that will run this public static function we just created. Now, this is giving me errors because I forgot to type in function here. So now we need our columns. So we got our columns from this method here, and then what we're going to do is let's go ahead and do our values and set that as an array here. And then we're just going to do a for each columns as column like that. And then we are going to check if they're not in an array, which we set up earlier, but we haven't done much with this yet. We're going to search for a needle in a haystack. So the needle is going to be the column, and that haystack we're looking at is actually this skip update. Now by default, the skip update's an empty array, so unless we do something with that, it's just gonna work. Okay, so if it's not in there, that skip update, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna say values, and we're gonna put our column as the key to that, and that's gonna be equal to this. Now we're gonna use a variable here, so we're gonna put opening and closing curly brackets and look for column. So this is going to take the property and it's going to be a variable. So if it were ID or name or title or whatever, each time it goes through that, it's going to look for this title, this body, this ID, and it's going to set it equal to the values column and put it in this values array. And then all we need to do after this for each is just return our values right here. So that is all we need to do there. So I'm going to save that, and now we have the get columns, the get values for save. The other thing that we need to do, so that'll be our save function. Let's go ahead and do our validation stuff, and I know that this isn't going to make a lot of sense because we haven't actually set this up yet. So you know what, first, before we do that, let's do our timestamp thing, and I'll explain that. If you go to the database, we created this created at and updated timestamps on our database, and I don't want to have to, every time I do this, manually update those. We want to be able to, the models to update these. So if it's created at, it's going to put today's date and time at the moment that it's inserted. The created at and updated at will be equal. But if it's an update, it's going to leave the created at alone and only change the updated at. And then so the updated at will be the most recent time that this has been updated, and the created at will be the original date and time that this row was created. So we're going to create a method that we can use to do that in our model object, and we're going to call that timestamps. So let's go down here right above, I think it'll right here above this, before save, and let's create a public function, and we're going to call this timestamps. Okay, and then what we're going to do is let's set a date time variable up, and so we can use PHP's built-in date time object class rather. We're going to instantiate that, and we're going to use the word now, so that whenever now is what we'll get, and then we're going to set that as the date time zone. So, and we're going to set that to UTC. So we're going to create now as a date time object with a time zone of universal time right here. So universal time is how we want to store this in the database, and then later if we ever needed to convert that to a user's time zone, we at least have a starting point. We know that they're all in UTCs, and that's the way that I would recommend storing date and time all the time in the database. Then what we're going to do is we're going to format this for the date time field, and the way that we do that is with a capital Y, a dash M, a dash lowercase d, and then we're going to do a space, and we're going to do an uppercase H, colon I, lowercase I, colon S. And what this is a 4-year year, so this will be 2021. This is a numerical 2-digit month, so it'd be 08 right now in August. And then the date is a 2-digit date, so it'd be 07 for the 7th of August right now. And then this is a time string, so the capital H is the 24-hour or military time as we call it here. And then the I is for minutes and S is for seconds. So that's how it gets stored in the database. So we will go ahead and format it that way. Now that we know the now thing, we just need to, no matter what, we're going to set updated at. So we're going to say updated at is equal to now. All right. Once we've done that, we just need to determine if this is a new object so that we can update the created at. So we can use our method we already created called this is new. If it's new, then we also need to set this created at equal to now. Okay, so that is all we need to do, and this will actually populate created at and updated at if we call the timestamps method. So that's super simple. The next thing that we want to do here is just create a couple getters that we can use. So above here, let's just do a public function get errors, and all this is going to do is return this underscore errors. Oops, I forgot the underscore. This is protected or private, so we will use the underscore there. And then we want to have a setter for this that we can manually set an error. So we'll do a public function set error, and then what we're going to do is pass in a name for that error, which would actually be a key, and then a value, which will be some sort of string there. And so then we can say this underscore errors, and then inside the array syntax, we're going to pass the name there, and we're going to set that equal to the value. So we can actually add an error with this set error method here. The other thing that we need to be able to do is we want to have a run validation method. So let's go ahead and add that right here above these errors, and we'll just call that public function run validation. And what this is going to take is a validator. So we'll have a validator that we pass into there, which we haven't created yet. And then we're going to say validates is equal to validator, because this is going to be an object that will have a method called run validation. All of them will have that, and we're going to actually use an abstract class to make sure that they do have that. So we're going to use run validation, and then we're going to say if not validate. So if this fails validation, then we want to do something very specific. And what we're going to do here is pass this validation pass. We're going to set that to false. We're also going to add an error. So we're going to say this, and we could use our set error if we want, but we can just do it manually like this as well. So we're going to say this errors, and we're going to pass in the validator field as our name, and then we're going to set that equal to the validator message. So the validator we haven't created yet, but the validators are going to be a way for us to validate, to do form validation and things like that. And we're going to set up a field and a message for each one of those validators, and they will have a run validation class. And this run validation is going to return a Boolean. So it'll return either true or false. If it passes validation, it'll be true, and then this won't do anything. But if it fails, it's going to, so if it fails validation, after it does this run validation, then what it's going to do is it's going to set the validation passed to false, and it's going to add errors here that we can use our get errors to get. Now, if you remember in our save method that we just created, we are checking this validation passed. So in our before save functions, what we can do is run or set up our validators, and we can automatically run that validation to make sure that they validate. So let's go now and let's look at the save. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. I think that's good for now. We will just add that to the before save, any sort of validation that we want to do. Let's see if there's any other methods. I'm just checking my reference material that I created before we started the project. Make sure I'm not missing anything. And I don't, oh, we have one more to do. So we'll just go ahead and knock that out, and we'll be done with our model. So what I want to be able to do, and I'm not 100% sure I'm happy with putting this logic in this model, but what I want to be able to do is I want to have a method for the models that we can pass our request into it, and if our request has a page defined, then we will set up pagination. So this is going to be able to set up pagination based upon a request. So, and I'll show you how that works later, but just down here at the bottom, we'll create a public static function, and then we'll do merge with pagination. And that's going to take some params, and by default, we'll just set that equal to an empty array. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say request is equal to new request, which we haven't created yet, so don't worry about that. But page is going to be equal to request get p. So we'll just do a p for short there. And we're going to say if not page, or if page is less than 1, then we're going to do an inline if statement here. We're just say page is equal to 1. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a limit, and we're going to set that limit to request get limit, and that will be a ternary operator. And if it does exist, then we're going to say request. We're going to set it to the request get limit. else we're going to just set that to 25. Now this 25 could be something we could add to our configuration file, but I think this is a good starting point if we don't have it set up. The next thing that we want to set is offset, and offset will be equal to our page -1 times our limit. So we're just going to calculate what the offset would be based upon the page that's set here. And then we're just going to add to the params our limit and our params offset will be equal to offset. And then at the end of this, we're just going to return our params. So what this is going to do is we're going to be able to use parameters just like we did with our where was it? Right here, this query param builder. This is basically going to use the request, and if there's a page set, whether it be page 1, 2, 3, or 4, and there's an offset set, we're going to set that in the params so that this will automatically kind of build up to do pagination. Okay, now don't worry too much at this point that this isn't working. The only reason we did this right now is just to round out the model, and we shouldn't have to do anything else with the model. Although I'm going to come back to this model quite often so that we can discuss things and understand what it's doing, because I know we went through this quickly and I don't expect you guys to understand this just yet, but I do hope as we use these methods in the models that I'm going to go back and show you exactly what each thing is doing and how it's working. So there should be no questions by the time we're done with this on how this model actually works. But there's kind of a catch-22 where I can't really build the model without knowing how it works, but I can't tell you how it works until we build it. So it's kind of a weird dynamic here that we just had to build it now, and then hopefully you can recognize some of this from our object-oriented programming crash course we did in the last chapter, but I don't really expect you to understand exactly what's going on until we can use it. And when we use it, we're going to go through line by line. I promise we're going to slow way down, and I'm going to show you exactly what everything does. But for now, we have our model object done, and I think what we'll start doing now is taking our application and just start building it using the core files that we already have. And when we get to something that we need, we'll just stop and build a core class for it. For example, we're going to need to do this request thing right here, which doesn't exist yet. So we're going to create a class to handle that as well. And you will see all of that when we get there. All right, guys. Well, I hope you're enjoying this. Please comment, like, subscribe, and let's go ahead and push this up to GitHub so you can get where we're left off here. So I'm going to do a git status. I'm sure I have some bugs in there because we weren't able to test it yet. So if there are bugs, we will fix those in future videos. Let's commit this with a commit message, and we're going to call this rounding out our model class. And then we'll do a git push. And then what I'm going to do is do a git checkout main here. And we are going to do a git merge v17. And then I will do a git push, do a git status, and we are good to go there. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.